In touch on this High Court ruling as well, and whether or not we're getting true democracy now when it comes to this vote. High Court ruling yesterday that Parliament has to vote on whether the UK can start the formal process of leaving the EU. Some MPs, of course, in a bit of a tricky spot, especially in Cambridgeshire, go with democracy and respect the result of the wider will of the people, or in some cases go with their constituents who voted to remain. Heidi Allen, Conservative MP for South Cambridgeshire, is with us this morning. Heidi, morning.
Good morning, Paul.
Well, I mentioned earlier you're wrestling with this. 2 falls and a submission. Which way are you going to go?
Well, it's like all things, we need to wait and see what vote and if a vote actually comes, because this is where these clever legal brains are going to be working their way through the judgment, and of course we've got to wait to see what the Supreme Court say in December. But I was glued to the news yesterday, and there were suggestions that, I'm not a legal expert, that even the court yesterday did not expressly say that the government must give us a vote, but that Parliament must be consulted. So there are going to be legal people out there now interpreting what that means. So we just have to wait and see. It's going to be really hard.
Well, let's imagine we're in a place. You're in the House of Commons.
I knew you were going to put me in this place. Thank you, Paul.
It's all right. There is a vote. You have to vote. You voted to remain. Your constituents voted to remain. But the wider majority of the UK voted to leave. Which way do you go?
Well, I feel like I'm splitting hairs. But, what is the vote? What's the thing we're voting on? If the vote is, this is the deal that the government have told us they're going to get, is the deal good enough? Do you want that deal? If it isn't good enough for us in Cambridgeshire, then no, I won't.
But that won't be the vote, will it? Because you'll get a vote before we start Article 50. You're going to get a vote before that occurs. So the vote will be...
That's the point, Paul. We don't know that. My understanding from yesterday, and as I say, it has to be confirmed still by the Supreme Court, and I'm not ducking the question. Genuinely, we don't know yet.
No. Well, there's a lot of don't knows. I mean, and like Donald Rumsfeld said, there's a lot of things we do know and a lot of things we don't know and a lot of unknown knowns and known unknowns.
Which is why it's really hard to speculate. If the vote is on, should Parliament get a say? Should Parliament be the people? The MPs be the ones that trigger Article 50? And we're put in that position where we have to trigger. I'll have to think really, really hard about that because, as you say, constituency-wise, overwhelmingly, my voters wanted to stay in, and they would want that to be the case. But even so, if all MPs around the country do that, we can't forget that more constituencies voted to come out than in, so it will leave us in the status quo.
What state will it leave democracy in if MPs voted by a majority not to trigger Article 50? What state would democracy be in?
I think given that the majority of MPs, as I've just described, represent constituencies that voted to come out, I think it would be a pretty appalling state of affairs, actually. Because, it's saying that we're better, we're superior, we know better. And actually this referendum, the whole point of it was that the government trusted the British people to make that decision. And if we then turn around and say, yeah, my constituency, I know you voted out, but I know better than you, then that doesn't make you a very good representative.
The perverse is also true. Your constituents voted to remain. So if you vote to leave, you're saying the same thing, aren't you?
Well, and this will be the hard decision, which is why I'm trying really, really hard when people, and I understand why, are trying to put me on the spot. It's because we don't know yet, and I don't want to get people's hopes up or irritate them. Let's just wait for the Supreme Court. It's not long. It's only December, and then we'll know exactly whether or not we will get a vote and what that vote will be on.
Is the problem here that nobody really knows anything? That we didn't plan for this? We've got ourselves into an absolute unholy mess and nobody knows anything?
About anything?
Well, does anybody really know what's going to happen once we trigger it? How we're going to get out? What the plan is? I mean, David Davis keeps saying he does. Stuart Jackson says we know. Really? I haven't seen anything.
I mean, I think first and foremost, from a constitutional point of view, it's unprecedented. We have never been in these waters before where, the government and the judiciary are, almost sizing up to each other about who knows, who can interpret the Constitution more. And for any legal experts out there, they'll know that this whole issue that Britain doesn't have a written Constitution, that's why things like this become very, very complicated. But in terms of, do we know what the negotiation, assuming we do still come out, do we know what that's going to look like? No, of course not.
Assuming we do still come out, you're intimating there that perhaps we will stay.
Honestly, I don't think that's the case. And that's why I'm, trying very hard to be realistic with people, that even if they badger me about how would you vote, ultimately I don't think it can make any difference at all.
But is this the problem, that everyone's waiting for somebody else to do something or say something or prove something or come up with some facts? We need some decision makers, don't we?
Yeah, and in some regards, I can understand why people were frustrated by what happened yesterday. I was listening to the radio this morning, LBC, sorry, different channel.
Disgraceful.
And people getting really, really angry. How dare they? The British people, who are these people? Who do they think we are, bringing this case to the courts? But, that's the delight of democracy, isn't it? That individual members of the public, it's not the government taking the court, the case to the courts. An individual can do that.
And a lot of people's reason for leaving the EU is they want more control. They want their courts to be in control, our courts to be in control. That's what you got yesterday, wasn't it?
Exactly. I know, and that's the irony, isn't it? That's exactly what we got. Like all these things, we can now go up to the Supreme Court. I think what will be utterly ridiculous is if we end up going to the European Court, because that's ultimately where this could end up.
Oh, my word.
I know.
Oh, there could be riots on the street. There is civil war, Heidi.
Which is why, ultimately, I do think, that this path, we will end up going down this path. I don't see that changing.
Is it not better just to have another vote?
On the referendum or generally?
Yeah, just let's get the facts, let's get the figures, let's get it all sorted out, get it written down on paper so we know what we're voting for this time around. So we're not being sold a pup, we're not being told lies on back of buses. Let's get everything in black and white on a piece of paper and say, look, there's the facts, man. Vote on that.
Yeah, this is the difficulty in a business context. That's exactly what you would do. But because we have this legislation that says, you can't do the deal until you've triggered Article 50, we can't tell people. I think the best we can perhaps offer is, assuming we continue down this path, trigger Article 50, we get the deal, whatever it might be. If people aren't happy about that, well, they'll make that clear in the next general election.
We're still going down this path. As somebody made the analogy this morning, we're all going to the restaurant, ordering off the menu, having the same thing, but we don't know what it is. There's nothing on the menu.
Well, I'm not sure we are all ordering the same thing, actually. Certainly the things that we'd like in our meal, in our Happy Meal in Cambridgeshire, are perhaps different than in some of the constituencies around the country where people wanted us to come out. And, we're all seeking that thing that we want. We want free movement of skills. We desperately need that. We need access to the single market for our scientific and research brains to be able to do business with each other.
If you want to be re-elected, Heidi, aren't you going to have to go with the will of your constituents?
Ultimately, yes. But again, it's hard, but I'm trying very hard not to be drawn on this question because there are just too many ifs. And I don't want to set hairs running. Let's wait for the Supreme Court. Let's say, and I've put a statement on our website, actually, which says that very clearly. Please be patient. Let's wait for that. And then when we know the facts, then get back in touch with me and ask me about my thoughts and my sort of sense of direction at the time. But I understand why people want to hear that from MPs now, but I do think they have to wait. It's not long. We all know, more clearly the position that we're in and what the choices will be.
But if that position makes you vote against your constituents, you'd be happy to do that if the facts pointed you that way?
Only if I could see, I suppose, nationally that it was better for the country as a whole. If it's bad for Cambridge, for South Cambs, if it's bad for the country, then absolutely no, I'll vote against it. But I would need to take some, convincing that, the two should be the same. We should be able to find a deal that's great for constituencies and for the country. And I'm hoping that's where we'll get to.
Well, we look forward to seeing that menu, Heidi, sometime soon. Because then we can order with confidence.
Absolutely.
Heidi, thank you very much. I know you're busy this morning, so thank you for fitting us in. Heidi Allen, Conservative MP for South Cambridgeshire.